Enemy is enemy. So this is what happened when they made up their mind. They will occupy certain areas on our side of the line of control to be able to dominate the highway, national highway, which is going from Srinagar to Leh Ladakh. Even the Prime Minister did not believe that these are Pakistan army people. Prime Minister himself, by the middle of June, I remember, he sent somebody to Pakistan to meet Nawaz Sharif to ask him कि ये क्या हो रहा है.
'Fought between May 1999 and July, Kargil war is perhaps the most watched, the most lived war of independent India. It is the first war that came into our living rooms. We saw it happening as it unraveled on our television sets. It touched us very deeply. And it also saw amazing feats of bravery from young soldiers, from commanding officers, and from the army chief himself. With us is the then army chief, General VP Malik, who led us to victory. So when did you learn about the intrusions?
I came to know about it when I was abroad. There were one or two minor incidents on the line of control in which some clash has taken place in Batalik, but we didn't know much details yet because it was still being handled at the lower level. And it was when I had gone on a visit to Poland and Czech Republic, and round about 14th, 15th, I learnt about this intrusion.
15th May.
May, that's right, 14th, 15th of May 1999. I learnt about the intrusion over telephone calls from, in fact, it was the ambassador who told me that there is some infiltration which has taken place. The Pakistanis are claiming.
Okay.
So I rang up Delhi and I said, what is happening? And then they told me, yes, there had been some intrusion in Batalik sector and Kaksar sector. And so that was the time, but we didn't know much details yet. And except for some incidents. But then I came back around about 20th, I was back in India, and then kept learning about more and more intrusions which had taken place earlier. All the way from Siachen sector, southern Siachen sector, to Batalik, to Kaksar, and to Indra sector.
So was this area not monitored, or was it supposed to be like that?
No, we had a number of posts, but the gap between posts was pretty large. Anything say between 10 kilometers to even 35 kilometers also. Now, the manner in which we held the post was that if there is any major intrusion taking place in that area, they will be able to spot.
Okay.
But the way this intrusion took place was they came in small numbers and they came through routes which were not being monitored adequately through patrolling. And the other thing was that they came at a time when there was much of snow, and so local people, our soldiers, troops, they never thought that they will be able to come through them. And we did not have any monitoring surveillance devices those days. So we were only dependent on patrolling or some flights which took place, helicopter flights, but they couldn't spot anything.
So what was the Pakistani reason for this, for intruding into Kargil, into this region?
Look, the real reason was that our occupation of Siachen sector in 1984, that had been a setback. And thereafter, they had tried a number of times to throw us back in Siachen sector, sometimes even operations undertaken by Pervez Musharraf himself when he was a brigadier, and they had failed.
Okay.
And so I would say that one was to take the revenge of 1971 war, and the second was this 1984, our occupation of. So that was a primary reason when they wanted to occupy this area.
Okay. And also the strategic, you said, would it entail altering the line of control?
Yes. So the purpose behind the operation was that they will occupy certain areas on our side of the line of control to be able to dominate the highway, national highway, which is going from Srinagar to Leh Ladakh.
Okay.
So they will be able to dominate that, and they will stop
It will kind of cut the access.
this thing. That was one. And there were other reasons also. They thought by doing so, they will be able to occupy some of the areas which they had lost in 1971, like Turtuk
Okay.
in southern Siachen area. And they'll cut us off in Siachen. The third reason I would say that they wanted to revive insurgency in this area, terrorism in this whole area, Dras and Kargil, etc. And I would put one more reason, and that I think was that, as they kept saying, that when they have negotiations thereafter with India, then they will have an upper hand to be able to negotiate with India over J&K.
So, but how did the war progress? Because as you said, you were traveling and the army itself, the soldiers there itself, the battalions there were caught unawares. They were not expecting it. So how did the war progress? How did it become a full-scale conflagration?
Initially, the units and the brigade, there was one brigade in this whole sector, they undertook some operation, obviously not with adequate troops and without proper information. I mean, okay, we have located some people on a particular height, so they would tell the unit to go and remove them
Flush
from
them
there,
out.
this kind of operations which were taking place in J&K for a long time now.
Okay.
And then from brigade it escalated to division, 3 div, and then 15 corps. So all along, even after 15th, 16th of May that I came to know, I was assured that, look, you don't worry about it. The lower formations are
they are going to handle
they
it.
are going to handle it, and it doesn't require much effort at the army headquarters level. But when I came, and immediately after that, I went to Udhampur, Srinagar, and to these areas, and I realized that this was much more than
just an intrusion.
These local units can handle. And that is the time we also ordered additional troops to be sent to that area. And thereafter, I would say we controlled the operation, although the command headquarters, Northern Command headquarters, and the Corps headquarters, they were also in picture. But then final escalation took place when I had briefed the cabinet, taken permission that the Air Force as well as the Navy will participate, and we'll have a proper military strategy on this operation. And that started working from 24th of May. And then we, of course, told our local formation that you will attack only when you are ready, when you are fully prepared, and when you have gained the information.
So the Air Force also played a vital role in this?
Yes. The Air Force also played a vital role. Initially, there was some misunderstanding because everybody felt, not only the Air Force, even the cabinet felt that use of Air Force will escalate it unnecessarily.
Yes.
But then after I came back and I had given the presentation to the Cabinet Committee on Security, then everybody agreed that yes, the Air Force should be taking part. Not only Air Force, we also had Navy taking part in this.
Okay.
So it was a military strategy primarily to put pressure on Pakistan on all borders, including the sea.
So how did Navy come into play?
A very large part of Navy from Arabian Sea, from Bay of Bengal, was taken to Arabian Sea area. And
Okay.
we started tailing their oil tankers all the way from Dubai to Karachi.
Oh, so just putting pressure that
Yes,
we
the
can
whole
do
idea
this.
was to put pressure on Pakistan
Hanji.
that look, we mean business and the war will end on our terms. I mean, that was
Yeah.
what I told
Yeah.
the troops also.
Yeah. And so Pakistan never initially, they just said these are not our men.
Yes.
So when did it become clear that these were people trained by the Pakistani and the army itself was taking part in it?
See, one of the first thing that we did was I told the formation after coming that I want identity of these people. It is not only Pakistan who were denying all that. Even our own intelligence agencies were saying that, look, these are jihadis.
Oh.
And some of the people who came in the first
Hanji.
lot from their side, they were all wearing salwar kameez, black salwar kameez.
Oh.
So even our troops would say that ye jihadis aaye hain. The intelligence agencies, of course, kept insisting that these are jihadis and these are not regular army. And uh, I said, I want identity because jihadis do not occupy ground.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they fire like gorillas, they
Absolutely,
fire and then they
absolutely.
scoot
And then
from
they
there.
go, yeah.
They go away. So that was what was worrying me. And I said that we want identity. And we got the identity by the, I would say, first week of June.
Okay.
And that is the time I told the Prime Minister also that as far as we are concerned, we are fighting the regular army of Pakistan.
And not the guerrillas, not the Mujahideen.
You'll be surprised, even the Prime Minister, almost, I would say, till the middle of June, did not believe that these are Pakistan army people.
So everybody was in a denial, in a state of
Everybody
denial.
was in a denial. I mean, Pakistanis, of course, one can understand because they wanted to deny it. But our own, it had major strategic implications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if right from the beginning we had said, okay, this is a Pakistani attack on our territory.
And that's how we will defend ourselves.
And but then it would have been declared a war right from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't it? And because people were still reluctant, people did not know. I mean, I'm talking of the political authorities and the intelligence backing. So therefore, it was never declared a war. We just kept fighting in that. So not being able to identify these people right in the beginning, and the intelligence agencies not being with us all the way. So it took, I would say, there were strategic implications. And the Prime Minister himself, by the middle of June, I remember, he sent somebody to Pakistan to meet Nawaz Sharif to ask him, "Ke ye kya ho raha hai?" I mean, apparently he also had some doubt in his mind.
Yeah, yeah. So it wasn't a clear cut. You could not do exactly fight it like a war and get over it as swiftly as you would have liked to.
That is one. Secondly, of course, for the first time, two nuclear nations were fighting war with each other.
Absolutely.
So that was also in everybody's mind. And that is the reason when they gave us permission to go ahead with the Air Force and Navy also participating in this war, they put that condition that you will not cross the line of control or the border.
You can't chase them.
You cannot chase them into their territory.
Yeah.
Or you cannot strike in their
territory. Yeah, yeah. So it was essentially restricted to the Kargil heights.
Yeah. We were told that the mandate was that you clear the area in which they have intruded.
Okay. So is it like fighting with your arms, with one arm behind, or finally you got to go ahead?
No, I would still say that it was one arm behind.
Yeah.
Because in all our operation, while we were putting pressure, we did not violate the mandate given to us, political mandate.
Yeah.
But I must tell you here that after some time, there was some understanding between me and the Prime Minister. When I told him that, look, if we cannot clear this whole area, then we will have no alternative except to go across.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I remember that day when I spoke to him, we were walking, Brijesh Mishra was also there. And I told him, I said, please don't make a statement that I have told the forces not to cross the border.
Yeah.
I said, don't make that statement again. That day in the evening, he sent Brijesh Mishra on a TV network, and he was the NSA. And he said it on the channel that, yes, not crossing the border, we have told them that holds good today. We don't know about tomorrow.
Okay. So
You
that
know?
was a veiled threat.
That was the way. So there was some understanding, I would say, although they never changed the mandate. The political CCS never changed the mandate, but we were prepared that in case something happens, we get a chance, we
Yeah.
will go across.
Okay. And so, what were the challenges? Because it was a high altitude war, and
Yeah, today people don't realize there were major challenges. First, of course, was the high altitude terrain, mountains, which
Absolutely.
we did not. And then the altitude effect is always there on the
Yeah.
soldiers. Uh,
because the last time we fought it in 1962,
62.
we fared rather badly because of
Yeah,
the
that's
altitude.
right.
Yeah.
And here it is not Ladakh. Now we are talking of similar something. And the beside the terrain part, the height which they had occupied, and the geography, the altitude, etc. The second was that we had no information at all. For almost till the middle of June, we were still trying to spot कि कहाँ पर आए हुए हैं.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that way, the intelligence agencies were also of not great help to us.
Yeah. So it was a failure, an intelligence
I would
failure.
say yes.
Yeah.
The third was that we were short of equipment because of lack of resources which had been given. In fact, those days we did not have much of a foreign exchange, so the armed forces were told to have only up to 70% of their authorization. You will be
Oh,
surprised that we did
my
not have
God.
adequate number of machine guns and the
So it was
artillery
not
guns,
100%,
etc.
it was 70%.
70% or less.
Yeah.
There was we were short of ammunition, etc. So that was another big problem that we had.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
And then, as I said, that we were two nuclear nations, so the international community had called both, I would say, India and Pakistan as rogue nations.
Yeah.
They were
going ahead with this conflict.
going ahead with the conflict. So we just could not get anything from abroad.
So there was no last minute requisition of more equipment.
Very little that we got, and wherever we got also, I would say it was not of good quality.
Okay.
And we spent money, but we didn't get much help
Goodness
from them.
out of it.
Yeah. And lastly, as I said, that there were people who were hesitant in their own mind, the political authorities, whether we should give them full freedom to go ahead to the armed forces.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
reluctance was there till the end, I would say.
Okay.
So
That was
under
very
those
unfortunate.
challenges, we had to fight that war.
Yeah, sir. And so this was also a very different kind of war besides the altitude, because it was led by young officers. You were there, you would visit them often, and you met so many of them.
That's right. Look, this kind of war in the mountains, in high altitude, ultimately it is the units, infantry battalions, supported by the artillery and supported by some other arms. They have to fight. Of course, the others are also supporting them, but final assault has to be done by the infantry battalions. And in the infantry battalions, the young soldiers and the young officers, they did, I would say, full credit to them. And they were the leaders, So junior leadership played a very important, very major role in winning that war.
Absolutely. And so, were there any wins that were particularly crucial, and that any heights that were crucial and that we managed to get
See,
back?
by the time the war ended, we had recaptured almost about 95%, 90 to 95% of the area. So we had recaptured, we had regained control on that.
And what would you say was the turning point of the war?
Yeah. So there were two turning points that I can mention. One was the first feature that we captured, Tololing,
Okay.
which was the closest to the national highway
Okay.
and dominating that. I mean, from there they could see anybody moving on the road. You know,
Oh.
so that was the first when we captured it by about middle of June
Okay.
99. Second Rajref and 18 Grenadiers and some units. Initially they had failed, but subsequently, when they went fully
succeeded.
prepared, we captured that. That was a turning point, and that gave me a lot of confidence
Okay.
that we
We will
can
win.
do it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second turning point came on the 4th of July when we captured Tiger Hill.
Okay.
Now, by that time, Tiger Hill as a feature, the photographs were all over the place, so everybody thought, कि ये कैसे हो सकता है, you know. And Pakistanis never imagined that we would be able to capture that.
Recapture it.
So that image that Tiger Hill had at that time, and when we captured that on 4th of July, which happens to be also Independence Day of the United States of America.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And on that day, the Pakistani Prime Minister was in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
at his own request to meet President
The-
Clinton.
Okay.
So that day, when we captured that, then we made it clear to everybody that, look,
We have an upper edge now.
and now it's a question of a few days. Anybody who asked me at that time, including Indian Express chief editor, I remember he rang me up and on. So I said it's just a question of a few days
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And that's what I told the Prime Minister also.
Hanji. And so, what lessons? How did Indian Army change forever after this war?
Yeah, there were major lessons. And as you know, soon after the war was over, the government had constituted a committee under Mr. Subramaniam.
Hanji.
You know, he with two other colleagues, they went through the complete aspect of national security. So there were major, I will only talk about the strategic lessons, you know. I think the first lesson that came out was that although now we are nuclear nations, whether it is Pakistan or China and India, but yet this kind of a war, a limited war can take place.
It's a possibility.
That remains a possibility. So let nobody think that now become nuclear nations and therefore the war is
We
not.
can afford to just take it
We
easy.
can afford to take it. That cannot happen. Also, I think along with that, one has to remember that as long as we have borders under dispute, our territory under dispute, you know, and as long as we continue to have these insurgencies going on, cross-border infiltration going on, there are greater chances of a war breaking out suddenly.
Absolutely.
You know, that has happened during Kargil war, and it can happen even in future. Today we are worried about that kind of a situation on the China front also.
Absolutely, sir.
So that was another major. The third, I think we learned a big lesson on command and control of the line of control and the line of actual control, and the need to keep it under surveillance all the time, not only on the ground but also from the satellite, through satellite imagery, through other means,
Reconnaissance, etc.
reconnaissance part. Not only that, even certain ground surveillance devices which we did not have earlier. So that kind of modernization was required all along. That became necessary because you need to spot the whole thing as early as possible.
Absolutely.
And
While
not
it's
like what
taking
happened.
place.
When it's
Yeah.
not like what happened in.
Hanji.
That was another big lesson. And I think the other aspect which the Subramaniam Committee, the Kargil Review Committee brought out was, you know, all along we've been fighting Army, Navy and Air Force in kind of silos.
Hanji.
So that jointmanship was
Missing.
or I would say less. And although we fought that war, but it's not the ideal way of fighting. Today, the conflicts have to be fought in a more integrated manner, much greater jointmanship. that is important not only for the operational reasons, but also for economic reasons.
Yeah.
Because then you save money from that.
Absolutely.
So they brought it out. This committee highlighted that, and I think the government also accepted it. But in order to implement that whole thing, the government took a very long time. You know, I mean, as you know, the CDS, the Chief of Defence Staff,
Yeah.
that came almost 20 years later.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And today also,
we
you
don't
have
one.
you know, the last CDS, unfortunately, he died in that air crash. But for last so many months, we haven't replaced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the government needs to understand that unless you have a head who is controlling all these things and who's giving directions on all these things and who's monitoring these things, so the kind of integration and the kind of jointmanship that we are looking at, will not come about. So that becomes an important lesson, which, as I said, somehow has not been implemented adequately. And lastly, I would say that our deterrence was weak. Now, deterrence means that the other person should think twice before
attacking
making such a.
Yeah.
No, apparently in that event, in that case, the Pakistanis knew that we did not have much equipment. The Pakistanis knew our weaknesses, etc. And they also knew that we did not have adequate troops in that area,
Yeah.
Kargil and Siachen and all. And same thing I can say with China, that 2 years ago when they intruded in eastern Ladakh, again they thought that
Absolutely.
we were weak.
And so, yeah, which is why that was my next question, that despite, I mean, these lessons were learnt, everybody understood.
Yeah.
But then Galwan happened, and China has been, that salami slicing technique it adopts, that's been going on. That hasn't stopped.
Again, with China, we've been also having a policy of a certain amount of appeasement. We do not want to fight a war with China. I mean, that has been this thing. And while we are defending our borders, but of course, we were hoping that after so many agreements that we've had with China, that they will not intrude. But then enemy is enemy,
Absolutely.
If they have made up their mind that they want to. So this is what happened when they made up their mind under the present regime that they have in China, under Xi Jinping. I can
because
say
they have that grand design.
Yes, they have that grand design. So as a part of the design, so they intruded in that. And we were not adequately alert, I would say, not adequately equipped to be able to take them on at that time. Much later, of course, now we've reinforced with those areas. Today, as you know, we have pumped in almost about 60,000 troops on that front.
Absolutely. And so does intelligence, does it still remain a weak spot?
To some extent. I mean, I've already told you about Kargil sector, but here also, now, there was some information that the Chinese were carrying out large-scale exercises in Xinjiang area, close to Tibet, very close to the Tibet border, and people didn't take much notice of it. Okay, they are doing large-scale.
Yeah.
It is from that exercise only they brought their troops on the line of actual control to intrude in our areas. So, I think the intelligence assessment was lacking here.
Yeah.
If we had alerted ourselves on that score, we would have pumped in more effort in that area.
Absolutely. And so what is this threat of two-pronged war that people talk about, that China is investing a lot in Pakistan, in that road initiative? So that there could be a threat of that. There is a constant...
China and Pakistan, they've had this strategic alliance now for a very long time. Okay. I mean, it's not only in terms of opposition against India, as in India being the adversary, but in every aspect. I mean, China has been supporting even their terrorism also today. Some of these globally known terrorists from Pakistan, China has been supporting, and they do not want them to be called as global terrorists, etc. So that kind of working together on strategic issues, security issues has been now known. Now, after 2 years ago, in 2020, there is absolutely no doubt that they are working hand in gloves, and whatever they do, they will be working together, looking at their interests together. And so today, two-front war has become a reality. In fact, some people are calling it two and a half front war, because the other half front is the internal security of these areas, J&K.
Absolutely,
You
absolutely.
know,
That's
after all,
true.
the army continues to be deployed on these
And JK,
issues.
yeah.
So it's not just two front war. Today we have to look into the two and a half front war, because the line of communications which go through J&K towards Pakistan, towards LOC or LAC, they have to be protected also.
That's true.
So the situation is far more, uh, I would say, adverse, more serious security issue.
And the tumult in Afghanistan, does that also?
Uh, there is always a danger, but so far there are no such reports. But there is a danger, because these terrorist groups like LET and Jaish-e-Mohammed, they do have camps close to the Pakistan
Afghan
and
border.
Afghanistan border, and they follow the dictates of the ISI.
Yeah.
So you never know when they might again send them to enhance, to intensify the insurgency and terrorism.
And so, how different? I mean, given that today you have a US a missile called Ninja missile, killing just one person, and we're saying it's not a it just cuts up a person. So, how is this future war, if any, even if it's a localized war, how different will it be?
See, a war, both tactics as well as strategy, it depends a great deal on the kind of weapon system that you develop. And the
Because they're
other,
saying China will launch cyber warfare.
yes. So the kind of weapon system, the kind of equipment, the kind of capabilities that you acquire. Today, China definitely is far ahead of us when it comes to cyber war capabilities. As far as the now today drones, for example, have come in. I mean, this last action that you mentioned, it was a drone
Absolutely.
which flew all the way from probably Bahrain or Qatar, and then came to Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
And then that carried out that strike
On one person.
on Al-Zawri, who
Yeah,
was
yeah.
standing in the
Balcony.
So all these things develop. These are all latest developments, technical developments. Uh, we are now getting into these ourselves, but I wish the pace would be faster, because the fact remains that while Pakistan may not be
As
close to
advanced.
us as far as these technological developments are concerned, but China is ahead of us.
Yeah.
So when we are thinking of our 3,500 or more border with China, LAC, so, and we have to fight, sometimes we may have to fight them, then we have to develop these capabilities ourselves.
And so what does will a scheme like Agnipath, where you're recruiting people for a short term, and you're kind of training people and then rotating them, would that help, or do we need a different kind of
Look,
manpower, equipment, a different kind of conditioning of the army?
uh, definitely different kind of conditioning. Agnipath scheme has got certain pros and also certain apprehensions. It's only when this scheme is made applicable, and the government has already announced it that they will make it applicable. So definitely we will have to watch the attitude of our men who come there for 4 years, and there are apprehensions that they may not be willing to accept that naam namak nishan, as we call it, that loyalty to the regiment, etc. So how will they behave? Now that remains a major area. Similarly, how they will be now, the new induction that takes place, will it affect the kind of volunteers that we were getting earlier? Earlier there was no dearth of volunteers.
Absolutely,
and many
because
of
it was a life made.
It was a lifelong lifelong sustenance as well as loyalty to
that's
the.
true.
So there are many of these things which are taking place. But I must tell you here that the primary reason of bringing in this scheme is the money.
Okay.
We haven't had enough money, and that is why we still remain short of modernization that we would like to do. Modernization suffers. We haven't got adequate money, neither in terms of the percentage of GDP, nor in terms of the percentage of the government expenditure. The defense expenditure has been going down. Although there is, of course, effort being made, a good effort being made to produce things locally, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But primary reason, as I can make out, is money. Now, Agnipath, for the next 10 years, probably we may have to spend more money on salaries and pension, etc. But thereafter, it will make money. Today, the requirement is to have more money available for our capital expenditure so that we can modernize.
Yeah, for the infrastructure.
For the infrastructure, for the new weapon system, for the new technologies, etc. They all require money. So the major requirement today is that. And if the money is not being given, then you have to, adopt things like Agnipath and others. So either the government should be prepared to give that kind of adequate money,
Absolutely.
or they will go for this kind of schemes where they can save money, not immediately, but maybe after a few years.
So, and what do you have to say to all those people who say, as we advance, we do not need the army, we do not need so many feet on the ground?
Humbug.
And okay.
Okay. I mean, this is ridiculous. Obviously, people don't know this thing. So, while technology does make us capable of reducing some manpower, if you have the technology, at the moment we don't have much of that. The second thing we have to realize is that there are certain types of operations which still require a large manpower. Mountains.
Absolutely.
In the mountains, you require much larger feet on the ground than you would do on the plain grounds. Similarly, the counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency operation, there also you require a large amount of manpower. So I don't foresee reduction in strength. While we can reduce some strength here and there, which the government has been trying, the armed forces themselves have been trying. But to say that we can make a substantial decrease in the manpower.
Lean and mean force.
No, I mean, fine, lean and mean, but it cannot be so lean that you cannot do your task on the ground.
And considering our geography.
Around the kind of operation that we foresee to fight.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mandari.